Horror Month. You are all my maniacs now.
We made it through another year, and another year of Horror Month is upon us.
Right!
So we've done all of the Friday the 13th. We've done all of the Halloweens, the Screams, the Child's Play, and now we've left the best one for last.
A Nightmare on Elm Street. What else? What else is there but A Nightmare on Elm Street?
So wait a minute, this is going to be the last review? Is that what I'm saying?
No, it won't be the last review, but this is one of the last, well, at least the biggest, most known, most popular horror monster in all of history.
I agree, and it even talks about on the extras here about how Freddy Krueger basically became like the new Dracula or the new Frankenstein. He was like the big thing that came out, and it's true. I mean, he is still one of the very few, the very last big horror icons that ever existed. I mean, there's still some out there, but there's nothing really been that big as Freddy or Jason or Michael, but Freddy seems to be like one of everybody's favorites.
He became so popular really quickly because he was different from all of the other slashers. That's basically what it was. When in the 80s, when they had this big burst of slasher films come out, he was different from everything everybody had done. Like Friday the 13th, you have a group of kids that went out to a summer camp and they get slaughtered.
Barreled, what is going on? This is Horror Month. Vince is blurry again. We can't have this during Horror Month. Barreled? Who are you?
My name is Wolford.
Oh, Wolford. Okay, well, Wolford, Vince is blurry. You have to fix this. We can't have him blurry, especially during Horror Month.
Okay, how's this?
Halloween, you had the babysitters, and you had the people on Halloween night getting slaughtered.
I don't know. I actually kind of like that one. Nah, we can't have that. Bring him back.
Without any parents around, without any authority around, and having very little to do with the parents, as a matter of fact. That's where Nightmare on Elm Street kind of went the other way. Because it's kind of the parents are what caused the whole Nightmare on Elm Street to happen.
So Vince, I have a story for Nightmare on Elm Street.
So this is story time with David?
It's story time for something. Okay, so my story starts way back in the day, and there used to be this theater. I don't know if you ever went to it. It was called the Kingsland. Do you remember the Kingsland?
Yeah, I went there once with you.
Yeah, and it was this old theater, and it only had one screen. And it was just one of those old gigantic theaters that they don't have anymore, that you would go and see a movie. It was a single film, and the place was huge, and it probably sat thousands of people, and it was just really an awesome, cool, creepy old movie theater. But then later on, I guess they wanted to compete with the other movie theaters, so they opened up a second screen up in a balcony. So they closed the balcony out, so the screen was about the size of your television, and there's probably about 8 rows there of seats, and it was a tiny, tiny screen. So my parents went to go see something there. I don't remember what it was. And they said that all they could hear was people screaming up in the balcony. That's all they heard was screams coming from the balcony, and they didn't know what was up there.
Don't you hear that?
George, shut up and listen, man! What is it? It's dead! People screaming!
And they came and told me, they're like, oh, there's some horror movie up there, a nightmare or something, and these people were screaming about it. And at that point, I had never heard of Nightmare on Elm Street. I didn't know what it was, never heard of it. And again, this is, I guess, the 80s, where there's no internet, there's no and if you don't hear about it, you don't hear about it. I mean, there's no way of hearing about something back then unless you read Fangoria magazine. So I was like, I wonder what this is. So of course I went down to the Kingsland, underage, to go see this movie, and my sister worked there, so they would always let me in. Went up to the balcony and started watching this, and the instant this movie started, I was like, wow, what is this? This is... And you know how it starts out with a little square in the middle of the screen, and when Freddy gets his glove, he's like, ah, and he turns the glove around. I still remember to this day, there was some woman, she's like, he had knives coming out of his fingers, did you see that? And I'm like, I think it was a glove he was wearing. I don't think they actually came out of his fingers. No, they're coming out of his fingers! From that point on, when I was a kid, I was Freddy fan club. I was #1 Freddy fan, and I come out of that theater just stunned, and I was just no words for it. And I actually went out and made Freddy movies. I made a movie called The Great Fangoria Massacre that had Freddy in it, and I actually made a Freddy glove. I took my mom's kitchen knives, cut them all up, and I had an orange glove, and I put them in this orange glove, and I made a Freddy glove back when I was a kid. And I made this movie, and one of these years I might show it to you guys if I can get it off. It's on a VHS tape. And he was in there, and I actually made like an 8-foot tall Freddy drawing, and I hung it on my wall. I took all these just regular typing paper, taped them all together, and I made this gigantic Freddy and I hung it up on my wall. That's how big of a Freddy fan I was.
Okay, well, I guess I do have sort of a kind of a story time for this. I actually didn't get to see Nightmare on Elm Street at the movie theaters when it came out. Never did get to see it. But the night I was going to go see it, I went to the Granada. You remember the Granada?
Oh yeah, I went there lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of times.
So the night that we went there to go see Nightmare on Elm Street, they were actually also showing Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo.
If you forget it, you'll regret it. Electric Boogaloo.
I went there with my brother and one of my brother's friends. The friend that he brought along didn't have enough money to go and see both movies.
No.
And we didn't have enough money to pay for him.
No, man.
So after we saw Breakin' 2, we came out and we were going to spend our other dollar and go back in and go see Nightmare on Elm Street. Well, he didn't have enough money, so I called my mom and my dad and said, you know, my brother's friend doesn't have enough money for this. And they were like, well, just come home. Just come home. And I'm like, but I want to go see the other movie.
It looks like I'm going to have to communicate with you in the language of the street. Yo, I'm broke.
That night we were waiting for my dad to come and pick us up, and while we were waiting, I got into a fight.
Whoa.
It was the first time I ever got into a fight in public anywhere, and I don't even know why. I don't even know why it happened. It just happened. And this guy came out. All I remember is I was standing there with my brother and his friend, and I looked up and I happened to see someone that I knew from school, and I just waved hi to, it was a girl, and I just waved hi to her. That's all I did. I was, hi, how you doing? You know, that was it. Next thing I knew, I was out in the street. Her boyfriend came out and pushed me out into the street.
My rings that say.
So I'm out in the street and I'm looking at headlights coming at me. So I jump back up and I get on the sidewalk and I see the guy and I'm like,
I think there's no bell.
I just said something like, well, don't push me, and I pushed him back and just went splat. He turns around to punch me, and next thing I know, I'm just swinging. I'm just punching on the guy. And his buddies started to come out, and you know, they were gonna punch on me because I was punching on him, and my brother pushed them back and started punching on them.
I'll finish you, your friends, and your whole damn neighborhood.
Here comes the usher, and the usher grabs me by my jacket and swings me all the way around. And then I'm looking at the street again. And I look up at him, because I had my knees bent for some reason, and he's holding me by my jacket. And I look up at him, I'm like, what the hell? And he's like, stop fighting in my theater.
Shit, no, man. I believe you get your ass kicked saying something like that, man.
And I'm like, I'm not fighting in your theater, I'm fighting out on the street.
Told you never to fight a street fight.
And he says, well, you need to stop fighting. I said, he hit me. He pushed me out in the street. He goes, you need to stop fighting, both of you. And he walks back into the theater. Well, later on, the guy comes walking by me, and he looks at me and he says, you know, I could have taken you. I'm like, okay, whatever. And he says, if you were in my neighborhood, I would have knocked you clean out. I'm like, why do I have to go to your neighborhood? I said, if you want to do it again, let's go.
I am a bad man.
I said, I'm standing here, I'm not going anywhere. Let's do it. Let's finish it. And he's like, no. And he starts walking off with his friends.
Yeah, so this was a classic. I mean, it came out and it was an absolute classic. The Freddy makeup was amazing looking. It was scary, and he was scary because he's an actual person and he was talking to you. He wasn't some guy hiding behind a mask, and he had the most amazing most amazing weapon here that you could possibly ever have. The thing too, though, is he was, and I think a lot of people forget about this, he was a child murderer. He would go and he would kill little kids, but then, later on in the series, they were making like dolls of him and puppets and, toys for little kids to have. And you can imagine little kids having a dolls of a person who murdered kids. It was really weird.
Yeah, a little bit, but you got to remember too, when this movie came out, nobody knew about Freddy Krueger, so there wasn't any gloves, there wasn't any hats or sweaters or dolls or action figures like this one. There wasn't any action figures of Freddy Krueger anywhere. So all of that stuff we built. Everything that we did, we built it, and we went looking for this stuff, and there was nothing like that around. So you had to build it, and they actually didn't start bringing out the action figures and all that stuff until like the third or fourth film.
So I want to talk a little bit about this collection. I do have an unboxing for this, if you want to go ahead back and rewatch it. So I'll probably put it on before this or after this, probably after this, because I want this to be the first video for Horror Month. So the quality of this is actually excellent. I went back and rewatched the first one yesterday, and I had forgotten how clear this movie is. It is crystal clear, and if you have a really good surround sound system, it sounds fantastic. It has all the sounds around you, and the music is all around you and surrounding you, and everything. It's really, really well done Blu-ray.
Yeah, so the first time I ever did get to see this, I watched it on VHS, and it sucked. I mean, comparing this Blu-ray to that, it sucked. I mean, it was dark. You couldn't tell what was going on. I didn't even know Freddy was in some of the parts that he was in the very beginning of the film, when they showed Tina walking along in the boiler room. I never knew that Freddy was like walking down below her, and that he was hiding around corners and stuff like that, because you never did see it in the VHS version of this. You didn't see any of that. And when he says all his one-liners like, "This is God," it was dark. You couldn't even see his face. You couldn't, all you saw was pretty much the glove and a hat, and that was pretty much in a black, dark figure standing there.
I completely agree with that. It's the first time I saw this on Blu-ray, I was like, holy cow, you can actually see Freddy now. And it was weird because, yeah, every time I seen this film, it was just on a faded VHS tape or what. I never actually had this on DVD even. And yeah, he's crystal clear in this. You can see all of his makeup effects. and everything, and he looks great. And I agree too, there's like parts that he's there and he's moving out of the way, which I've never seen before either. And I was like, wow, he was in that scene and I never knew it. So yeah, the quality of this is outstanding. Really, really well done for the transfer here for the first Nightmare.
Also, the soundtrack to this is phenomenal. I love the music in this movie. It's absolutely awesome, by Charles Bernstein. Just freaking fantastic. The theme song, everything, even the jump rope song is just absolutely cool. And that's one of the appeals about this, is it has just a cool, nightmarish soundtrack to it. And it's just awesome. And I actually do have the soundtracks to all of these films, so I might do a review of that.
I agree. I mean, as soon as the music comes on in this movie, you know it's Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a ding, ding, ding. I mean, as soon as you hear it, it's Nightmare on Elm Street. It's sort of like we hear Friday the 13th, or you hear the Halloween theme or the Psycho theme. It's Nightmare on Elm Street. There's no wondering, where did that come from? What is that movie from? It's a Nightmare on Elm Street.
You speak of child murderers, you hear that little childish theme, that ding, 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 ding. Wow. I mean, but it was supposed to complement the whole 1-2 Freddy's Coming For You theme or jump rope song.
Now, there's tons of extras here we got to get to, Vince. So let's get to them right now. Here we are on the extras, the meat and the guts and the eyeballs and the blood of every movie. We made it here to the extra section.
Okay, so the first extras on the first disc of the first movie, Nightmare on Elm Street, starts with audio commentaries, which are usually what they start with. So we've got two audio commentaries here. And the first one is Wes Craven, Heather Langenkamp, and John Saxon. And it's a really cool, interesting listen to hear these three go and talk about the film and their experiences on the film. It actually is a lot of fun.
Now, I listened to part of the first one. I didn't listen to the second one. But yeah, it is actually pretty interesting to hear Wes Craven talk and everybody talk about the film. But with a lot of extras, if you watch this commentary and then go back and actually watch the extras, you're going to be hearing the same stories over and over and over, because these people only have so many stories to tell. So he tells how he created the Nightmare series, and then the extras he tells how he created the Nightmare series, and then something else he tells how he created the Nightmare series, and so it's always the same thing you hear on every extra.
So the second audio commentary is basically sound bites. And what I mean by that is that it's like stuff where each person, it's the cast and crew, and each person is discussing the movie. I don't know if they're necessarily watching it, but they're discussing parts of the film, and it's just, there's so many of them, I guess that's what they did, is separate them into sound bites. When they do the sound bites, the one thing I thought was really cool with this is they actually introduce each person. So you hear a guy come on there and say, Heather Langenkamp. And then Heather Langenkamp talks about the movie. Or you hear the person come on there and go, Robert Englund. I really like that they did that, because a lot of times when you listen to these commentaries, some of them overlap and they have kind of the same tone of voice. So sometimes you get mixed up on who's saying what.
So the first extra on here is called Never Sleep Again. So Wes Craven in this first extra actually talks about how he couldn't get anyone to buy the script for Nightmare on Elm Street. And of course now you look at it and you're like, what, people were crazy. And you see it in any movie that's become popular, and you take it to a studio and they're like, nope, we don't want it. So he took it to New Line, which wasn't even really a studio. I think they had one room above a bar or something. That was their studio.
They were distributing films, they were making films, but they were like the really, really low budget stuff that barely anybody heard of.
And once the guy, Bob Shea, once he actually read the script, he got it. I mean, he was like, oh, yes, I understand this, unlike the rest of the studios. And Wes Craven was like, well, I would get a phone call from him like every other week, say, hey, we got an extra $50 to make this movie. And that's the shoestring budget they actually made this movie on. It was like ridiculous.
Yeah, knowing all that, and you hear all that, them talking about this, it's like, wow, you think about it now, New Line is like a big studio now. It's, and it was all because of Nightmare on Elm Street. It was all because of Freddy.
And he also talks about how he did the effects in the movie. And of course, one of the most famous scenes is the latex wall, or the spandex wall. And, from the new film, the remake that came out, obviously you can see what it would look like if they did it in CG, and it looked horrendous. And this was a real effect. They just went out and basically bought a spandex, and they said it was new back then, it was just coming out, a piece of spandex, a guy behind the curtain, behind the wall, and he just pushed himself, it wasn't even Freddy, it was some other guy, pushed his way in, came out, and the lighting was perfect, and it was one of the greatest sequences in cinematic history, and no CG there, people, none.
Yeah, CG was non-existent then. They did all of these practical effects, and yeah, that's the thing. Even when I saw the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, that was the one effect in there that just, I actually literally wanted to get up and leave the theater after I saw it, because it was just that horrendous when they did it in CGI.
Up next is The House That Freddy Built. Now, this was an actually interesting extra because they go through all the movies from the first one to the last one. Or at least until Freddy's dead. I don't think they go into the new Nightmare, do they?
Yes. They also went into Blade, Blade 2, Final Destination.
Yeah, they pretty much cover all the movies that they made, and they show clips from all of them. And it's all right. It's kind of short. It's interesting to see where New Line started and where they went, and it's an okay extra.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I actually really like this because of that, because they did like a retrospective of all the films.
Up next is Night Terrors. And this is all about talking about dreams, the different cultures, and what dreams mean to different people. And they had all these dream experts on there talking about different stuff.
I actually enjoyed this because normally I probably wouldn't. This would probably be one of those, it's not really having anything to do with the movie, and they just stick it on there. Like, it's just something they just throw on there because, well, it has to do with dreams, so they just threw it on there. But this one they actually did take some time with and got Wes Craven in it. They actually even talk about how the dreams and all the nightmares and how people have these dreams and nightmares and how it relates into the Nightmare on Elm Street series.
This whole thing wasn't bad. Kind of short again, but pretty good extra.
All right, so we got one of these little sort of like trivia things called Fact Track. And basically all it is while you're watching the film, you see little messages across the screen about different facts of what happened, during the scene, or little trivial stuff, Robert Englund actually did this, or Wes Craven actually set this up this way, or this came from this nightmare, or whatever. So next there's focus points. And focus points is kind of like the fact tracks, except that what happens is when you're watching the movie, it'll pop up this little disc. When you click on the disc, what pops up is basically clips from the making of Nightmare on Elm Street. So if you watch the making of Nightmare on Elm Street, the Never Sleep Again documentary, that's what pops up. It's little clips from there. So they go into the documentary while you're watching the movie.
So last up, we have alternate endings, and these were actually interesting because they talk about in the commentary and some of the other things on here about how they didn't know how to end a movie, and they wasn't sure what to do for the ending of the film. So they filmed it 2 or 3 different ways, and they have them all on here. It's pretty cool.
Well, also what happened with the ending was, I guess Wes finally decided to film, I think what is now on here called the happy ending, and Bob Shea, the producer, wasn't crazy about it. And he was like, well, if we end up making sequels, we need to have something to do with Freddy in there. So that's when they started adding like the stuff with the scary ending and the Freddy ending, where the Freddy ending actually has Freddy driving in the car. And the scary ending is basically kind of the same thing as the ending that's on the movie now, except that the whole part where the Freddy takes over the car isn't there.
So overall, I think the extras here are pretty good. There's a lot of them on here, but they're not that long. Each one, I think the first one is probably the longest. Each one is probably 5 to 10 minutes, some maybe 15 minutes. But yeah, they're actually a good selection of extras.
If you've had any of the other Nightmare on Elm Street sets, like the DVD set, or especially the Criterion collection of Nightmare on Elm Street on Laserdisc, they had a ton more of stuff, of especially the deleted scenes. They had a ton of deleted scenes on that. There's nothing like that on here, just these alternate endings, and that's it.
So there you go. There is our review for Horror Month, our first review we have up here. And of course, we are going to go through all of the Nightmare movies, every one of them, maybe even the remake. We haven't decided yet. Bring them all to you here for Horror Month 2018.
Oh yeah!
They say you bottomed out when you can't remember the night before.
Yeah!